Why did Rutte's statement about the war that is killing Russia become a sore point for the Kremlin, a headache for Europeans, and a test of strength for NATO? The invisible role of the NATO Secretary General in your everyday security, Ukraine, Iran, Europe. And why does one person in Brussels influence the future of the entire planet? Imagine a person who is simultaneously trying to break Russia, not quarrel with Trump, and not drag us into a war with Iran. His name is Mark Rutte. In 5 minutes, you will hear the phrase that makes Rutte considered the main personal enemy in Moscow. Maybe not the main one, but still an enemy. Everyone is looking at Trump, at Putin, at the Ayatollah in Iran. No one really looks at the Ayatollah anymore. But the real ringmaster, the ringmaster of this crazy show, is sitting in Brussels and smiling in Dutch. His name is Mark Rutte, and in the next 15 to 20 minutes you will understand how this man can change your life, even if you have never heard his last name before. Today he is accused of waging a war that is killing Russia. He is waging a war. That he is Trump's American agent in Europe. That he is the one who can either prevent or turn Putin's strike against Iran into a major war. Not a movie hero, but a real NATO Secretary General. While we have our morning coffee, he's deciding how much weaponry goes to Ukraine, how Europe will talk to Trump, and whether NATO will be drawn into new wars in the Middle East. Stay until the end. You will hear one phrase from Rutte, after which Russian generals, European officials, and American diplomats all clutch their heads at the same time, or whatever they consider their heads. Who is he? Mark Rutte, almost 13 years Prime Minister of the Netherlands, a man who survived in Dutch politics, and that's a tough political arena, longer than most presidents stay in office. He was called Teflon Mark. Everything bounced off him. No matter what they tried to pin on him, it all bounced off. Scandals, crises, resignations. He just smiled. He smiled, he got on his bicycle, and went back to his office. He got on his bicycle. While other people arrived at summits in motorcades, Rutte liked to show up on a bicycle. It looked like a cute PR move, eco-PR. But in fact, it was the perfect disguise. A man who looks like a friendly neighbor, but deals with matters of war and peace. Now this friendly neighbor is in charge of the largest military alliance on the planet, #1. That's why his name is appearing more and more often in the toughest headlines. We'll go through 3 stories together. How Rutte is waging a war of attrition with Russia. How he's trying to tame Trump. How he could turn out to be the man who either stops or legitimizes a major war with Iran. Story 1. Ukraine-Russia, the war that's killing Russia. Recently, Rutte said that Russia is taking insane losses in Ukraine, that this war is killing the country. In a military sense, it's destroying equipment and people. Politically, it's slowly cutting Moscow off from Europe. For some, it sounds like a statement of fact. For others, like an admission. Our goal in the West is to weaken Russia as much as possible. Rutte supports a scheme in which NATO does not fight directly but gives Ukraine more and more weapons. Why? Well, so that the slaughter continues. This is war, right? A war in Europe without a declaration of war. On one hand, we're not a party to the conflict. On the other hand, NATO warehouses and factories are working in such a way that every day becomes more and more costly for Russia. The question is this a strategy for peace, or is it a strategy of slow strangulation where no one really knows where the Kremlin's red line is? And how much more is Russia willing to pay while everything in the West is decided by a smiling Dutch bureaucrat? If Suvorov, the one from the Alps, saw this war, he would ask, "The front, where is the front?" And he would be told, "The front is in the office." Well, where they count the shells, where they decide how much more Russia can endure. Formally, Rutte has no button to start or stop the war, but he doesn't command the troops, he doesn't give orders. His role is that of a political director, to shape the agenda, to align 32 NATO countries, to propose new formats of support for Ukraine, funds, training, coalitions, The real decisions are made by the governments, of course, but the pace, the tone, the speed depend on how he frames the question. In the second part, I'll tell you how Rutte himself saved the NATO summit when Trump was already was just about to slam the doors. Rutte, Shea, Donald Trump. So that's an important moment, right? The real problem is that Rutte is constantly fighting this war, being drawn to one person across the ocean. The person's name is Donald, last name Trump. That's it. And here, in Europe, for them, in Europe, he's called not only an enemy of Russia, but also an American agent. So, on one hand, they call Trump a Russian agent, and Rutte, who is against Russia and with Trump, they call an American agent. Well, do you understand the logic of the left or not? The former head of the European Council publicly stated that Rutte should stop being an American agent. What does that mean? Let's translate from diplomatic language. Some of the European elite believe that he listens to Washington too much and is too afraid of Trump. Well, he's afraid to quarrel with Trump, right? Rutte understands perfectly well. NATO without the US is just a nice sign, but without any muscle. On the other hand, every concession to Trump kills the idea of European independence. Trump wants to lead. I'm going, and you run behind me in the same direction I'm leading. I'm going, and I'll explain it to you the day after tomorrow. I don't have time right now. For Eastern Europeans, he is a guarantee that America won't leave, and that NATO tanks will stay closer to their borders, not to Florida. For some Western socialist decaying countries that have let in a huge number of Muslims, he is the person who puts Europe in the eternal position of a junior partner, which, well, of course, we are. But we don't want to feel that way. We want to do nothing, pay for nothing, and still feel as if we are equals. Great, right? You can imagine a conversation like this. Mark Rutte, are you for Europe or for the US? I'm for NATO. And who is NATO for? NATO is for stability. And at that moment, someone in Washington is smiling very broadly. The paradox is simple. If Rutte goes head-to-head against Trump, NATO could fall apart at the seams. That man is Trump, who can cause things to fall apart at the seams. If he tries too hard to adapt, Europe will finally become an appendage to the White House. That wouldn't be so bad, actually. Well, that's what I think. And somewhere in the middle are the fate of Ukraine and the security of Eastern European countries. And this dilemma becomes even scarier when a new war with Iran appears on the horizon. Closer to the end of the video, there will be a scenario, let's say, where the decision of one person in Brussels makes Iran your personal problem. And at the very end, how you personally can avoid becoming a hostage of this game, even if you don't vote in the US or the Netherlands. When the US and Israel strike Iran, one of the first people Washington will call is the NATO Secretary General, not because he commands American troops, but because he will have to explain things to Europe. Do we follow the US or stay out of it? For some NATO countries, Iran is just the distant Middle East. For others, the question is whether tomorrow missiles will fly not only at Israel but also at NATO bases and critical infrastructure in Europe. Or is it the one who should bring everyone to the table and say to his colleague, here is our common position? Imagine a parent meeting where one dad has already fought with a neighbor and the rest are deciding. Do we pretend it's their personal conflict or do we call the police? As a whole neighborhood. Rutte is that very chairman who has to write the minutes in such a way that no one is embarrassed and the house as a whole doesn't burn down. If he supports every American move, Europe risks finally getting dragged into other people's wars. If he starts slowing down the US, he'll be accused of betraying allies and undermining NATO unity. And again, it'll look like a soft Dutchman on a bicycle. But in reality, the choice is between a major European war and trying to keep the US from starting another one. Who is Mark Rutte, really? The smiling Dutchman who, in a single day, can make new red zones appear on the map of Europe. Today, we have only outlined the contours. In the next episodes, we will discuss the three main questions. Is NATO's goal really to kill Russia? Why does Europe tolerate American agents in its own structures? And how far can the strikes against Iran go before Rutte's voice falters? And now something important. The world doesn't change according to the news schedule, but every time a new alliance appears, a new decision is made, a new missile is launched, and a new person takes the helm. As soon as something new appears, you want to be the one who finds out about it first, not last. That's why if you click the bell now, this video will spread faster, get into recommendations, and reach those people who would otherwise remain in silence. And today, silence is a choice. If you want to stay in silence, that's your choice. And here's a bit of optimism. As long as we know by name those who decide where the front line will be, we still have a chance to at least influence our own line of defense. Your own opinion, your own voice, and your own decision, not to live in ignorance. Subscribe, hit the bell, and next time we'll break down those who think they're controlling your future without even introducing themselves. Until next time.